On this episode of A State of Control, we talk about the residential side of AV, how the residential and commercial sides have been converging, where are the differences, but more importantly, what are the commonalities and the unified user experience that needs to be provided. All that and more on A State of Control.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A State of Control.
A State of Control, episode 62, Lifestyle in the Workplace.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Middle Atlantic, what great systems are built on, and by Chief, the global leader in commercial AV mounting solutions.
Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, programming, and automation aspects of the audiovisual industry. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. So this podcast tends to have a little bit of a commercial slant. Part of that's because that's my background and I choose a lot of the guests. But today we're gonna take a little bit of a turn and we're gonna talk about the residential portion of the AV industry and AV solutions and also how that ties in with programming and automation. So first, I'd like to welcome back my partner in crime here at State of Control. His name is Uncle Richie, and his goes by Rich Fregosa as well. How are you, Rich? Welcome back.
I'm doing good. Mellow West Coast greetings. Like I said, I've been dealing with a bit of the plague in the house, so I'm glad to be upright and making sure that we get this show going. So missed you on the last show. Heard it was great, but glad to be back on this one.
Glad to have you. So next, I have two guests. Both are regulars on our weekly residential-based show called Resi Week with Matt Scott, as Rich is also a frequent guest there. First of all, I would like to introduce Joe Whitaker from Thoughtful Integrations. Welcome, Joe.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
And last but not least, someone I've gotten a chance to know and hang out with and had some fun with. His name is Stephen Bronner from Pro Audio Georgia. Welcome, Stephen. Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely, man. It's beautiful here in Georgia, and I'm looking forward to this. This should be a lot of fun.
Excellent. So, as I said before, the residential and commercial parts of the industry, they've tend to be separated. But I think as time has passed and we've gotten a lot more accustomed to the fact that there's a common user in the mix, and there's been some convergence, I believe, across the markets, and especially when it comes to the user experience. So Rich, why don't you start by kind of laying some of the groundwork for us? Is that the case now? In the past, you've either done one or the other, and usually the one that you do, you're comfortable with, and the other one you're afraid of. Is that it? Are the differences that vast still between residential and commercial?
I think the differences are lessening. Absolutely. When you first started out, you were a commercial guy or you were a resi guy. There were very few that were comfortable kind of being the utility vehicle between the two, because it's two very different client profiles. In a current commercial environment, you're dealing with somebody's place of work. You're dealing with multiple users who may or may not have a vested interest in the process and just kind of want to get in, do their presentation, and get out, or they may be performing meetings. Residential, you're dealing with somebody's home and their lifestyle and some very deep-set personal motivations and preferences, and that's a different interaction with the client. You may not be necessarily dealing with the client directly all the time, so you may be dealing with a client manager, a property manager. You may be dealing with the representative, the interior designer, the architect down the line. And so typically when you were in one camp, you weren't necessarily as happy about trying to figure out how to navigate in the other camp. However, we've been hearing resi-mercial a lot. I mean, that's something that it's been unofficially claimed, and I think more and more we're seeing it being used in print and in publication, that there is that convergence. It's always been the dreaded C word, convergence. But, we're seeing more of that. I'm seeing more residential dealers are getting involved in commercial aspects. That, they're doing restaurants, they're doing, sports bars. They're finding their ways into doing even huddle spaces and other places, even places of worship I'm seeing. And so that's something you didn't necessarily see, even 5 years ago. But because the manufacturers that we're dealing with are saying, well, we can provide a unified platform that's going to work, whether it's a 4-bedroom house or it's going to be, a sports bar with, 15 displays throughout and a couple of zones of music. I think that it's something more now than ever we need to start paying attention to and finding opportunities to give these dealers the ability to get into one or the other, and both at this point.
So Joe, following up on what Rich is saying, and I know that you do offer solutions in both camps. When it comes to the user experience, are there enough consistencies to be able to say that somebody can be at home or at work or even in an entertainment type of situation and be comfortable with the same type of a user interface and operation, or they really these systems have to be separated?
Logistically, yes, they have to be separated. But I've found over the past few years, because we do residential, obviously, and we do bars and restaurants and aquariums and airport command centers and all that other stuff. But we've kind of been wrong for a really long time. And it's kind of catching up on that. The consumer space has kind of at least made us and our company aware of, 18 years ago, when I was geeking out, I'm like, oh, we could put a button here and we could customize this to do that. No. We like to get nerdy on that, but we were all wrong. It's like when you walk in a conference room or you walk in a restaurant, you're managing the restaurant, you want one button that gets everything done. You don't want to be, and then if you go to another interface, you don't want to see an interface that's jumbled up that doesn't look like the one when you were in room 101 and you go to 102 and you're like, oh wait, the button should be right there, but they put it over here this time and they made it orange. So, back in the day, we used to get really tricky with, that custom side of really customizing the interface. But like what we found is, I call it KISS, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. It's, locking it down where everywhere you see it, everywhere you use it, it always looks the same. And, in commercial projects, we used to get really, intricate with that customization. But we found the opposite thing that happens in residential. In a residential space, you'll have 3 people, 3 to 10 people that are there all the time, and you may have 4 to 5 guests a year. You go to a commercial environment, you've got 1 to 2 people who are there all the time that you need to use the system, and 100 to 1,000 guests that come in and use the system. So it has to be really catered, really to the point, and kind of like you alluded when you asked me the question, they transition very well that way. Of course, you might want the back screen or, the icons to be a little more catered to the user or to the corporate environment. But making the looks the same, feels the same attitude across a platform has become so important. And I've learned for a good 5 years, back from, we'll just say 2000 to about 06, I was wrong. I'll be the first to admit I was entirely wrong when I was nerding out. But yes, that transition of back and forth in the user experience is really starting to come hold because these people are worried about money. These people are worried about lifestyle. And guess what? Those actually converge. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That has become a big part of kind of the universal truth in the way user experience is within a UI, whatever the UI may be.
So Stephen, bring you in on this. When you think about residential systems, you think about customization and kind of like what Joe was saying and being personalized. However, there's been this greater trend these days, based on our market as well as other products, that the simple, almost a basic interface and operation is really what's winning. Is that what you've been seeing? Is that really what is winning over clients in the residential side? Because that wouldn't be what I think an outsider would think that is not really familiar with this market.
Well, I think that what you have to do is you have to take it all into mind. You've got your custom clients and you've got your clients that are not custom. So you can follow the Logitech Harmony model, which then grew into the Control4 model. I mean, it all started with Logitech. That's where that came from. We have a wizard. You plug the information in, the program generates the interface. It generates everything. And I actually think that's a great model. I've always said there's room in our industry for custom and there's room in our industry for standard. When you're doing commercial, it has to be really, really simple because you're dealing with the least common denominator. You're dealing with the guy that knows nothing and is terrified of his smartphone, and you're dealing with the IT guy that is fully convinced that he probably started the internet. That is what you're dealing with in that. Now, when it comes to residential, there is more of a custom side to that if that's what the client is looking for. Some clients want it. I give this great example all the time. One of the popular control brands, all their touch panels are red and black. Okay, I'm a Gator fan. I'm a Florida Gator fan to the core. You put a red and black touch panel in my house, we're going to have issues like Sports Illustrated style issues. And so what I'm talking, there's room for everybody. I like to pick at my friends that they do other control brands, and I like to jab at them. But the truth is when it comes down to it, there's room for custom and there's a time for custom. But I think that you guys are right. Most clients are looking for an easy standard interface. One thing that we have in my company that we do, and I know Richie probably does this a lot, is we take a lot of pride in our interface. And I tell my clients, you always hear the same thing. You got to teach me how to use the system. If I hand you a controller and I have to teach you how to use the system, I haven't done my job properly. Because that means that, yeah, you might be able to use it, but can your wife, can your husband, can your daughter, can your son, your mom, your dad, the housekeeper? If you can't just pick up an interface and use it intuitively, there's a problem. So that is when you get into custom, because your one size fits all, just like clothes, never really fits anybody. You have to teach them. You have to do this, then you do this, then you scroll the wheel, then you do this, and it's all this in between. Whereas custom comes in when you need to make it absolutely clear what's going on. But in commercial programming, like Joe said, I mean, that's the secret. Keep it simple. I mean, you don't need sliders for everything. They don't need to be able to adjust the bass and treble. And yeah, you want to keep it all streamlined. So like when we do government buildings, or I have some military contracts, when we do those kind of control panels, they are literally, I think, the most complicated commercial panel that I have out there has 7 pages of programming in it. I mean, and a residential touch panel might have 40. It's a different animal.
So, Rich, maybe you can take us to the next step now. One of the things that we talk about a lot is the programming and configuration, and I think we struggle with that a bit on the commercial side, but I think that's been more prevalent on the residential side. Where does programming come in, and how does is that value provided, or is the configuration model really what is going to get you to that end result that you're looking for, and it's going to work the way it's going to provide you the solutions that you're looking for?
Well, it comes down to a word that we've used a lot on the commercial side called framework, right? And on the commercial side for many years, and again, we've had the luxury on the commercial side of having to push the process along. And we always talked about it, that initially in the early days of automation, it was commercial that pushed residential. We're seeing the inverse, especially in the last 10 years, due to, the iOS ecosystem, where residential now is pushing a lot of the innovation in commercial. But originally we started with framework. I know originally we worked on a standard process. I remember you were very helpful with the dashboard that Infocom created originally. We had conversations about how do we unify this process so that somebody could just walk in and use it, and across the industry, could we agree on things such as placement? How does this come along? Fast forward to much larger tech companies, that wasn't necessarily our choice anymore on where placement occurred. Things like the hamburger menu, that is now just ubiquitous in any device that you pick up, whether it's a tablet, a phone, your web page. Phrases that we've never heard of before are being driven by companies that are generating and producing hundreds of millions of devices, right? So what's happened is that the framework element and the interaction element and the user experience element isn't necessarily being driven by us. We're having to play catch up and play in a different sandbox, which is, well, my iDevice operates like this, or my Android device operates like this. This is what I'm used to. I would like an experience closer to that. So it's caused a big shift in how we've been operating. What I do appreciate seeing is that the manufacturers are taking this more seriously. When we first started out, if you didn't have the credentials to be able to write code, not configure, not add buttons, not create a little drop down of if this, then that, but the ability to get down into the source level of creating functions and moving things along, you didn't have a whole lot of options available to you. We had many starts and stops, and you've been through as many of as I have over the past 25 years. Manufacturer would have a great idea, wouldn't quite take traction. Next thing we knew, the 3 or 4 projects that we decided to go along with and try it now no longer support it. So we were once bitten, twice shy down the line in terms of, how we would deploy those strategies. But, with this advent of resi-commercial that I'm seeing is that the manufacturers are saying, look, we are going to invest some time. We are going to hopefully streamline and flatten some of the friction points for you and provide the ability to be able to push out 80% of the projects. And that's a key point that we always need to focus on, which is, there's lots of projects that a configurable solution, they're going to hit the mark. Absolutely. And that's where you support it, you put your energy, and it's like anything else, it's that 80-20 rule. And I see that progressing, and we're seeing it from manufacturers. We're seeing it not only from, restaurant, but we're seeing it from Control4. We're seeing it from URC. We're seeing it from Logitech even. We're seeing it from all these manufacturers who are saying, we're going to go ahead and focus on getting the product out, focusing software and engineering firepower, and trying to flatten these friction points for you within that 80%. And I think that there's lots of companies that will make a great living, can support their clients, and can get jobs in, out, done, and paid. And we've always talked about it, right? Just get in, get out, get paid. And that's always first. As a business, to be successful, you got to get paid. You got to make sure you're eating. With that said, some companies, as opposed to others, take a look and say, okay, we also do have a pool of software developers. And they give that pool of software developers the ability to say, okay, this is something completely off the menu. Are there tools, or can we work with tools to diverge from that? Can we either do it completely custom and go off the menu, or can we hybridize it and work back and forth? And that's the next part that I'm curious to see where the evolution is. Some of them are walled gardens, and what you get is what you get. I've always used the Panda Express analogy, right? If you go to Nome, Alaska, and you enter and you get Kung Pao chicken, it's going to be the same in Nome, Alaska as it's going to be in Brooklyn, New York, right? And that's fine. And if you like the Kung Pao chicken, you're going to love the Kung Pao chicken wherever you go. Can you special order? No, you can't. About all you get is extra soy sauce, and that's it. So again, once you stay with it and you invest in that ecosystem and you manage the expectations, you're smooth sailing. It's when you get that difference, that divergence. And that's where I'm always curious, because I'm not as vested in a lot of these other ecosystems. And that's what I'm curious about, is what happens when you get that condition. If you go to the manufacturer and say, I need X, well, do they come back with you and say, give us 48 hours? Or do they come back to you and say, give us 48 months? That's, for me, always kind of that black hole of information. Where is the support going to come from if you happen to be one of the companies that's pushing the envelope? Because that's always the question, is if you're innovative, you're going to push the envelope. Do you have the support to be able to do it? Or do you have to pull back and say, yeah, that's not going to happen, and then manage the expectations up front?
So I think you bring up a good point, and I'm going to jump over to Stephen and see if he can shed some light on this, because I think that what you pointed out too is that there's a lot of manufacturers that are born out of the residential side that have really made their success based on configuration solutions, and it's been happening for quite some time, and that could be the key to providing this ease of use and simplification and consistency. So Stephen, what can you maybe give a little bit of your experience on kind of what Rich said, is what happens when you get asked to do something that is a little bit outside the box, and is it something that is an easy task to address, and how do manufacturers typically respond to that?
That is the key to what control system you pick. And I love that. I love this topic because I think it's very awesome. The lines have been blurred in the last 3 to 4 years, but used to it was very defined. Either your system was a pre-cut, pre-assembled URC or Logitech style system, or you could do pretty much what you wanted to do. I mean, every system has limitations. I've dug into all of them. I looked into all the systems, and here's what I found. With the system that I chose, which is RTI, it's not a big secret. Everybody kind of laughs about it. But I chose RTI, and the reason why is we have a rule. I run my company very much like Jerry Maguire. Fewer clients, broader service. So whenever a client calls me, the answer is always yes. And with RTI, I can do that. So if the client calls me and says, and this is a real example. I had a client call me and say, hey, I want to put a picture of my dog on the screen of my touch panel just in this one room. And I want the icons to be paw prints, and it was the dog wash room, but they wanted to be able to control the music while they were in there. So I want the icons to be paw prints and all this stuff. And this was a few years back. And instead of looking at my client and going, oh, that's going to take 12 hours of programming, and it's going to cost you an extra $1,500, $2,000 or whatever the price is, I was able to look at them and go, absolutely. Remember, I told you the answer is always yes. And that has gotten me a lot because the API that we deal with is so open. It's ridiculous. Third-party driver developers. I know, Steve, you do a lot of that. You do, and we as programmers, configurers, whatever you want to call us. I think that term is a little touchy, but the whatever you want to call it. I think that guys like you that write third-party drivers that allow us, I think what Richie said, take that edge off a little bit, smooth the kind of point of entry for these different products. You guys make a massive difference. But at the end of the day, if you walk into a situation, whatever you put in your client's home, the answer should never be no. That client paid you as an expert, and that client expects for you to be able to offer them that level of service. Now, if it's a pre-configured style client, entry-level home, in and out, simple touch panels, yeah, the answer might be, well, yeah, but you need to change this because that's not the price point you were in. But if you're dealing with a custom client, and the client comes at you with some crazy request, hey, I want the camera image to pull up, and if I double tap, I want it to zoom in, and all this stuff on my touch panels, or my remote control when I pick it up. If it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I want it to look like this. If it's midnight, I want it to look like this. Those kind of things, you shouldn't have to tell your client no. I'm really big on that. You should be able to look at it and go, yes. when you start playing outside that box, Richie literally knows everybody at Crestron. Like literally, I think it's quite possible that the janitor gets a Christmas card from Richie at Crestron. That's important. And I guarantee you Joe's the same way with Control 4. Joe can probably pick up his phone if he has a problem and he can't get it solved through tech support and get an engineer on the phone that will fix it. I had the same thing at RTI. When you build these relationships and you carry these products and you support the product and you go forward, if you run into something that is outside the box, the client's crazy, how do you expect for me to do this? You can call engineering and you can bounce it off of them. And between all their brains and my half a brain, we can usually figure out exactly how to do what we need to do. That's the key. The control systems aren't necessarily limited. I like to pick at Control 4 because it's a pre-configured style system. But the truth is, and a lot of Control 4 guys don't even know this, you can go in and do anything you want to do with Control 4. You can do custom graphics. You can do anything you want to do. It's a little tougher entry than RTI or Crestron. It's a little harder, but it's doable. And that is the point. The point is they didn't used to be that way. These systems were cut and dry. You were one way or you were the other. But now you can go out, you can have all this fun, you can do the simple stuff, cookie cutter stuff, or you can dig in and be custom. But you should never have a customer that pays you to be the expert. You should never look at them and have to tell them no. You might tell them yes, but bring money, which I say all the time. They love that. But you should never have to tell them no.
So, Joe, fill us in then from your perspective. Do you select a control manufacturer and go all in on them, as Stephen said, or do you try to find different solutions based on what you anticipate the needs to be, or maybe use different solutions because they're either more geared to one type of application versus another?
You know, I always look at it as like the trending attitude. The way things change over time with technology, understanding the consumer, whether it be business or residential, because I grabbed this out of the drawer of my conference room desk, by the way, as a really good example. Everyone knows how to use this remote. My 80-year-old grandma knows how to use this. My 8-year-old kid knows how to use this. Everybody in the state of Missouri knows how to use this remote. That's the attitude that should be taken towards UI, whether it be a touchscreen or remote or whatever, is the familiarity process. Power makes it turn on and off. Volume makes it turn up and down. You know, when you get too custom, you lose the fact of what you're trying to give a customer in the end. And kind of the trick of, like, you know, you talk about picking a control system or automation company or any of those, is those trends change. And as those trends change, certain companies get behind others and certain advance, right? So I've been in handcuffs with Control 4 for 15 years, but in that time and in between, I mean, back in the day, I used to do some HAI and I did some RTI and I did some Elan, and we're toying with Savant now. And, you know, it's following that consumer trend that matches your business. Because if you know how to do this, it's like going to school and taking a second language, French, Spanish, whatever the case may be. It's still a language. You know, you're still dealing with the same thing. You just got to learn a couple of other things. You know, back end is great. And if you know how to do that, kind of like we do, you know, awesome. But manufacturers are now less about the technology and more about the market trend. That's actually a scary thing, because you can go all in, invest all in, like certain people did with Colorado VNet. Boom. Was a pretty product that went through 4 different owners or so. I mean, didn't Rush Sound own them at one time? So, but that's that example of they caught a trend at the right time and gave them a powerhouse for 2 years. Then the trend changed. They didn't stay in suit. They didn't have any back end money. So boom, they were gone. But then you see the, you know, Savant's transition in the past 6 years. They came on strong, caught a fan base, kind of messed up and lost their trend. They weren't keeping track of the consumer profiles, almost died. then they're making that re-up. It's that watching the trend, and manufacturers are figuring out one very important thing right now. And Richie lightly touched on this, but it's one of the things for everybody watching and listening to this, I really want them to soak in their mind, is you talk about, resi-mercial and the blend and which one is pushing which. That is true to a point. The point different now is a commercial integrator, so to speak. You actually don't do anything for their job unless you are installing corporate networks, or your PC tech support, or you're building the servers that are their backend for their email, their, all their corporate environment. You're just creating a lifestyle space inside their corporate environment to boost productivity, which is the same thing you do in a residence. Look, feel, touch, and experience. A conference room isn't so much about infrastructure anymore. These people are, bringing their own device. They're bringing laptops in. I'm not selling them any of the equipment they actually do work on. I'm enhancing the experience of the work they're doing, but I'm not providing them work tools. This big video wall we did at the airport, that's a marketing experience. That's not something to work. So that transition has more to do with the way we live our lives inside our house and out, whether it be in a bar, a restaurant, a conference room, an airport, in my car. Same thing. So now we're actually getting to a user experience at a very root level. Manufacturers are catching on, maybe a little faster than we are. But now we're starting to see the trend. I have this one pitch that I use all the time, and I just got to use it. I couldn't catch up with Richie during Expo because I was going to take him over to the Denver aquarium job we're doing. And they have a restaurant there. And my thought process there is, you throw up some TVs or some speakers, or you make things easier for the bartender to turn on 27 TVs to the right channel at certain times. But at the end of the day, you're in a lifestyle experience. So when you walk in there, you're getting taste and smell. Where are the sights and the sounds that match the environment? Is the music that the chef was listening to when he was inspired to create that dish? Let's expand that experience. Same thing in commercial, same thing in conference rooms. So I think that's the shift. I think it's less about the drive of technology, but more about the expectation of the consumer on how they're going to experience that environment.
So I think you touched on a lot of good things there. And, one of the ones that I wanted to talk about, and maybe I'll come back to you on this, is that, how are we, the commercial side of the business has really been rocked by a lot of the soft codecs and a lot more dependency on hardware, and a lot less to put into a system. That I'm presuming with streaming services and so forth is also the case on the residential side. So are these systems becoming naturally simplified, or are they becoming actually a little bit more challenging to be able to provide a greater experience? Joe, why don't you follow up with that, since you were on a good roll there?
So that experience, I kind of missed part of what you were saying because my headphones cut out. But everything now, the worst part is it wasn't driven by us, right? It was driven by the mass manufacturing companies, whether it be, Amazon, Tesla. That want in need shift has happened. It wasn't spurned by us, but we're having to follow it. Where the Apple Watch on my wrist, all of these things, it's all about the experience of what we're doing through the use of connected technology, but not stupid stuff like Wi-Fi pins. Now we're getting to the point where there are technological expectations out of the way we live, to connected Nike shoes, we're really in what I'm considering the next industrial revolution. Probably started a couple of years ago. Now we're really seeing that trend to it's all about how I experience everything around me. If anybody paid attention to any of the news, like in the last 2 weeks, where Amazon introduced some new wearables or rings, some glasses, there's another connected set of glasses out there. We're coming to the point where we, as in, me, you, Steve, Steven, Richie, we're all expected almost to augment the way people live inside their spaces on a 24-hour basis. That's the key, because it used to be how Richie described, there's a residential guy and there's a commercial guy. My job was, the 3 hours they had at home before they went to sleep after work, their 8 hours of sleep, and their 30 minutes before they left. Or the 48 hours of the weekend. And then the rest of that day, the 8 to 12 hours of work, 5 days a week, was Richie's job. Now that has changed, where they're expecting that framework to go from before I even woke up, when the shades start coming up before I'm awake and the music starts coming on slowly and the coffee pot is making my stuff, to the point I get in my car, that connected transition to work continues as I'm moving towards the workspace. And then they want their personal space in their office or conference room to continue that. I have a couple of customers in the bar and restaurant industry who are trying to figure out how to bridge that gap. How can I take technology, personal wants and needs, and bring that into the table setting of a client? When they sign up on Facebook or they like it, what music were they listening to? What are they watching? What are their taste in this? Oh, the guy's got a heart problem. Don't give him a lot of salt. They're trying to figure out how to make that transition period so it just keeps moving. I think we're close. I think we're going to get there. But that's that thing, is we all the mass market companies like Logitech, Sonos, Nest, Amazon, all these guys pushed it for us. Let's be honest. But we are getting to the point where that is not a satisfactory experience. So now it gets kicked back to us to carry that torch. But man, today it doesn't matter what the UI is. Could be voice, could be haptic, tactile, gesture. Doesn't matter. We're getting to that point where it's all about what happens after the voice is said, the button is pressed, they sense me in the room. We're like onto something big. Richie's all about it, though.
Well, Rich, I'll give you the last word. We're actually up against time, but the question that I had, and you can maybe tie a ribbon on this, because it's been a great conversation, and we always tend to run out of time here, is that is it important for an individual or a client to think about having one person then to provide it, as Joe said, this continued experience 24/7, and bridge the home and work life?
Well, I think in a perfect world, yeah. And especially if you can be that person or that company. So, I'm always going to promote that. More than anything else, I think it's a matter of partnerships and being open to finding a way for residential and commercial companies to bridge that gap together. There's installations, and I'm really fortunate that I get to partner with a lot of commercial integrators and residential integrators, and have the luxury of being able to see the challenges that they run into. Being a former integrator myself, I remember the challenges, and I don't necessarily have any love for having to go through that again. It definitely takes a lot to do both. If you can, great. I think that they are still two different demands on your time, on your staff, on your workflow that you always need to be cognizant of. And for one company to be kind of a one size fits all solution, I think it's a great goal. I think realistically, there's just sometimes a matter of biting off more than you can chew as a company, and you can get yourself in trouble very quickly. I've always been a fan of collaboration. That's really what my business model is based on, is collaboration. Assembling teams of people who are very good at what they do, and then working together to let everybody do it and make money at it. So if you have a company who's working with the technology manager, and that technology manager has, as part of an enterprise, and they've got 15 different sites throughout the world, well, there's no way you're going to have a residential company go to 15 different states or countries to be able to deal with, the C-level management. However, if as a residential company or a resi-commercial company, you do have partnerships, or you can help out and you can work with them and translate that process, so much the better. Which leads me to reaching out. And you see it in commercial, we see it with the VIXA. In residential, you see it more with the buying groups. it's a matter of learning how to share information. And right now, it's kind of that 48th parallel between residential and commercial. Commercial guys don't really necessarily understand residential guys. Resi guys don't understand commercial guys. And so sometimes never the twin shall meet. And I think once we soften those lines between those companies, then that leaves the opening for it. You know, and again, it's if you can work together and all can make money doing it, so much the better.
Well, that's a good place to stop. So thank you. And I think that this is, of course, a very enlightening conversation, and I appreciate everybody's insight to make that happen. So I'd like to thank you guys for being a part of it. First off, Joe Whitaker from Thoughtful Integrations. Joe, how can people get in touch with you, learn more about your company and what you're up to?
They can always email me just directly at joe@thoughtfulintegrations.com. Find us on Facebook at Thoughtful Integrations, and we are now on Twitter at Integrator Tweets, and you can always find me at CEDIA.
Very nice. Stephen Bronner from Pro Audio Georgia. Great to see you again. It's been too long. How can people get in touch with you and learn about Pro Audio Georgia?
You can reach at me, pro_audio_GA on Twitter. Easy to find just about anywhere. You can do look for hashtag Country Boy Smiling. I know a lot of you will be not surprised by that hashtag. So I'm pretty easy to find. Pro Audio Georgia, Stephen Bronner. Call me, like Joe said, reach out to me anytime. I love to work with other integrators. I think Richie is absolutely right. That's my favorite part of the business is collaboration. And I look forward to hearing from you. So
last but not least, Rich, another great show. How can people get in touch with you and learn what you're up to?
One of the ways to find me is on Twitter at @rfregosa. You can also find us on our website, fregosadesign.com. But most importantly, you can find us here on AVNation.tv, obviously on our show, but also follow us with a suite of all our other shows, AV Week, Resi Week, The Social Life, the shows keep going. That's where we really like to find you and obviously support us.
So I'll piggyback on that. Visit avnation.tv to get all of the shows. And for the audience that is particularly interested in learning more about the residential side of the business, check out Resi Week with Matt Scott. I'm sure he'd appreciate you listening and pitching in for us. Please, check out the State of Control site. Listen to our back episodes, and please leave us some comments and feedback. We'd love to hear from you and like to know more about what you're looking for us to provide. For me, you can reach me, Steve Greenblatt, at Steve Greenblatt on most social media platforms, and my company Control Concepts at controlconcepts.net. So for us at State of Control, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us.